Welcome back to the channel, everyone. In today's video, we'll be looking at Amazon. Is it undervalued going into 2026? We'll start off by looking at the Q3 report from October 31st, and then we'll look at some of the recent highlights that they highlighted in the report in terms of how well the business is doing and new verticals they're expanding into. And then finally, we'll do some revenue modeling and looking at the valuation. So then we'll do like a DCF calculation at the end of that as well. So let's jump straight in. In terms of the Q3 report, Amazon did have a good report. So they reported net sales increasing by 13% in comparison to the third quarter last year. Their North American segment sales increased by 11%, and their international segment sales increased by 14%. And then what really made the stock jump up after earnings was the AWS segment. The sales increased by 20% year over year. So they saw some reacceleration in AWS. And then in terms of their operating income, it hasn't changed. It was 17.4 billion in the third quarter last year, and it was 17.4 billion this year or in this quarter. So they also highlighted in that case that they had a settlement with the FTC, and like if it wasn't for that, then it would have came in at 21.7 billion of operating income if they didn't have to pay those charges. In terms of free cash flow, they're down significantly on free cash flow, and that's due to them investing into AI a lot more. So their capex spend has been pretty high in the last 2 years, I'd say. So if we look at here, like their free cash flow has been decreasing. And then once I'd say like their capex spend regulates to more normal levels, then we'll see a reacceleration in free cash flow once again. So I don't think this is much of an issue. Looking at Andy Jassy, the CEO of Amazon's comment on the report, he does say AWS is growing at a pace we haven't seen since 2022, reaccelerating to 20% year-on-year growth. We continue to see strong demand in AI and core infrastructure, and we've been focused on accelerating capacity, adding more than 3.8 gigawatts in the past 12 months. He also mentions that the same-day delivery of perishable groceries is expected to expand to 2,300 communities by the end of the year, and double the number of rural communities with access to Amazon's same-day delivery and next-day delivery. So they're seeing quite an acceleration in growth in AWS, and it's mainly driven by AI, I assume here, that he's referencing with the gigawatts. So they do have a lot of demand coming in, and it's actually being used up. So that's very positive. In terms of other highlights on the report, so they had quite a few. So we already mentioned the increase in gigawatt or power capacity in the last 12 months, mainly driven by the investment in AI. And they do mention also that it was more than any other cloud provider. And it's kind of to be expected since Amazon is the biggest cloud provider right now. So you'd expect the capacity to need to grow from them quite a bit, especially. They also mentioned that they did sign new contracts. So here they have Delta Airlines, Volkswagen Group, and others. Perplexity I can see here on Cursor. So they're growing in terms of that as well. They're signing new contracts, so that's very positive. And in terms of the rural communities getting access to same-day delivery, they've increased it by 60% in the last 4 months. And they've expanded the same-day delivery of perishable groceries as well. So that's a new vertical for Amazon, delivering perishable groceries. And it's expected to grow quite a bit. And I think there'll be a lot of people making use of that service as well. So in terms of also their Prime subscription, they now offer NBA on Prime Video. So they're expanding into live sports, and I've seen from my own Prime subscription that they now also offer football on there. I didn't realize that, but that's pretty cool to see. So they're expanding their Prime service quite a bit, going into live sports, and then they have their taxi service that they're trying to build out. So they say here they began offering Zook's robo-taxi service to customers in Las Vegas, becoming first fully autonomous ride-hailing service in a purpose-built robo-taxi, and they've announced Washington, D.C. as their 8th testing location. So in terms of this, Google's Waymo is the leader in the development here in the robo-taxi space, but Amazon is looking into expanding there, and it'll be a new growth vertical for them if it does succeed. So that's also a good sign over here. So that's really it in terms of highlights I wanted to show. They had a lot more highlights in their report in terms of what the business is doing and how it's growing. But I think these ones show that they are growing positively into new verticals and expanding what they currently have with AWS and Prime. So there's very good signs for Amazon in the near future. Next thing I wanted to look at was the valuation. So I wanted to do like a modeling of how the revenue, or what the revenue could be like in 5 years. So I wanted to go through like an example of how I would do that. So Amazon is split up, if I can find, actually if I go on Crawl Trim here and I do revenue by segment, so we can see here Amazon is really right now the main revenue generating sources are their first party online sales from the Amazon store and their third party online sales from the Amazon store, and then they're growing their advertising business and their subscription business with Prime, and then AWS is another big business for them, so that's generating a lot of the revenue, and then they have other as 4 billion in revenue. So looking at that, what I wanted to do was like go through each kind of revenue generating segment and look at what the potential revenues could be like. So we'll start off with AWS. So Amazon right now is leading the cloud space. So AWS is the biggest cloud provider. They're about 29% in market share there. And looking at an article from Goldman Sachs, they expect the cloud revenues to reach 2 trillion by 2030 amid the AI rollout. So they expect the AI expansion to really lead the expansion in the cloud space. If we project that out, so AWS's market share is about 29%, as I've said before, and they're expected to generate around 110 billion, something like that, in revenue this year. So projecting that out to 2030, let's say the cloud market does reach around 2 trillion in size, we'll end up at like 200 billion in revenue just from AWS by 2030. So we'll keep that one in mind. Moving on to online sales. So I found this article from Shopify, and they were saying that the current global e-commerce sales are expected to be around 6.4 trillion in 2025. So using that as part of our like table for projections, if we do project this out a bit more, so it's 7.8 trillion in 2028 or expected. If we do project that out a bit more to 2030, we can assume around 9 trillion in global e-commerce sales by then. And assuming Amazon maintains their position in that market, they are the leader, they sell the most things really online, we can expect their revenue to grow up to 600 billion by then. Currently it's at around, if I look over here, so I'd say it's around 450 billion if we combine third party and first party sales. So I think it's a safe assumption to expect them to grow to 600 billion by 2030. If we move on to advertising and subscription services, so in 2024, advertising generated 56 billion in revenue and subscription 44 billion. If we project that out as it's supposed to, or as it's expected to grow really by 2030. So advertising is expected to grow at least a 15% year on year increase, and then subscriptions at least a 10% year on year increase. So advertising we could be looking at by 2030 around 130 billion, and subscriptions at 77 billion. So if we take all of that into consideration, and then I'm not sure why this is blurred out here, but okay, it's in. So we said cloud, so AWS at 200 billion, Amazon store or online sales at 600 billion. And in this calculation, we're not really including any new vertical that could be generating a lot of revenue. So this is kind of what's generating revenue right now, and we're just projecting that out. So advertising at 130 billion and subscription at 77 billion. So our revenue projection would be at 1 trillion for 2030 or around that. So if we take that into consideration and then we multiply that by, or we take 11% of that, which is around what their net income return is right now. So if we look at their trailing 12 month, I had it somewhere up here. So their trailing 12-month net margin was at 11% as of the latest historical data over here. So we can expect, if it does stay the same and we keep it at 11%, we can expect them to have a net income of 111 billion by 2030 as an assumption. And then from that, we can use that for calculating the EPS. So if their shares outstanding does stay around 10 billion and they don't dilute shares much further, we can use that in our calculation, and we can predict an EPS of $11 per share by 2030. So looking at that, that's kind of how I would go about modeling what the revenue could be like, and then use that to have some estimations of what the value of the share price could be in 2030. What I wanted to do also was take our projection of this much in revenue and EPS and see how the analysts are looking at it as well. So see how well we matched up with their projections. So if we go to here, I'm on Interactive Brokers. They have a section for analyst forecasts. And if we look at here, they're projecting EPS to be at $13.29. So that's by 2029. So maybe like 13.5 by 2030. So our estimate came in below that. If we look at the revenue, what they're estimating for 2029, around $1 trillion for revenue. So going into 2030, maybe $1.1 trillion, somewhere around that region. So looking at that, our estimation is close to what analysts assume Amazon will be doing. Our estimation is a bit lower, a bit more conservative. But I always think it's a good exercise to actually project things for yourself, and then also see what other people's projections are, as you never really know what can happen with these things. So it's just, we're trying to predict the future here, but since we can't, we just try to get as close as we can, or at least hopefully as close as we can. So using these projections, let's look at a DCF calculation for Amazon. So in terms of EPS, if we look at DCF EPS calculation and we use a CAGR calculator, we expect the EPS to be at around $11 by 2030. And right now the EPS is sitting at $7 in the trailing 12 months. So we'd be looking at an increase of around 10% year on year. So we'll use that in our calculation. So we'll put in 10% here, and then if the multiple stays around the same, we'll go for a 30 EPS multiple on Amazon. So we can see here our expected return by 2030 could be around $340. So right now the stock is sitting at 230. So I think that's a pretty good return. In terms of estimations, we in our projections we're really not considering any new growth verticals for Amazon. Um, there should be a lot of operating leverage going into play as well with Amazon, so the numbers can come in quite a bit higher when it comes down to EPS eventually. So we'll look at a more bullish projection as well. So we'll do EPS 15, and we'll keep the EPS multiple the same. So we can see here the price can almost double in 5 years. So in terms of our original question, is Amazon undervalued going into 2026? I do believe so. I think it offers a good risk-adjusted return going into the next couple of years. Um, Pending their AI spend, has a good return on investment, and they do have a couple of growth verticals they can grow into. Amazon does operate more like a growth company than a really big established company. So they're always looking for something new to invest in and to expand their revenue sources. So I think it'll be a good investment over the next couple of years. So let me know what you think, and I'll catch you in the next video.